Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic:
how do you feel about 700 Marines being deployed to LA? The most recent modern invocation of the Insurrection Act took place in 1992, when President George H.W. Bush used it in an attempt to quell the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. On May 1, federal troops were deployed with local police and sheriffs to maintain order, but the differences between military and police training soon became apparent. In one notorious incident, the Marines and police were called to respond to a domestic disturbance at a local home. When the officers arrived, the inhabitants fired a shotgun through the front door. A policeman yelled, "Cover me," meaning hold your fire but prepare to shoot as necessary. The Marines, however, responded instantly in the way they had been trained, where "cover me" means provide me with cover using firepower. The soldiers then opened fire on the residents, shooting more than 200 bullets into the front of the house. 3 children were inside the home at the time. No one involved in the incident was killed, but federal troops were pulled out of Los Angeles on May 10, just days after their initial deployment. This incident illustrates the enormous safety risks posed by deploying combat-trained troops to a civilian environment. One miscommunication could have ended civilians' lives, children's lives. The fact that none of the bullets hit any of the individuals involved is a matter of pure luck. Edit: this is the article one quoted. A Marine write up a book that is the reference. Well, that's a massive difference in meaning of "cover me." It's like the term "repeat." The military makes it very clear that this word is only used in one very specific instance. The minute you start deploying regular troops to a city that hasn't asked for them, then you're an authoritarian government. I'm sure that's been the plan all along. He literally said it was his plan. And now, behold, the plan. Coming soon, MAGA. He's just joking about shooting American citizens, arresting those awful Democrats, and those are clearly fake news dead Mexican insurgents dressed up as regular citizens. Quote: my Marine friends say, you send us in to kill everyone and blow up everything, not act as police. Look at what happened in Iraq. They don't even like the idea, let alone me. Same thing my Marine friends said. We aren't training to do anything but fuck shit up and kill people. This is a bad idea. Yeah, either they do nothing useful to the police or gun down a bunch of people in a miscommunication. There's a reason you separate military and the police. One fights the enemies of the state, the other serves and protects the people. When the military becomes both, then the enemies of the state tend to become the people. William Adama. The SCOTUS said years ago that the police have no obligation to protect you, so even that is a lie. More concerned about how the 700 Marines feel about it. I'm honestly curious how the 700 was selected. It's purely based on where they are stationed. The Marines allegedly being mobilized are currently stationed at 29 Palms. I'm sure they just took an entire battalion, probably one of the ones already stationed in California. Just looked it up, it's the 2/7 from 29 Palms, California. I was stationed with them and knew a ton of them, well, 20 years ago. Marines is crazy as they usually take their jobs seriously. We swore an oath to uphold the Constitution and protect the country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. ICE is currently acting like a domestic enemy, kidnapping people without due process. If I was an NCO in that unit, I'd be telling my guys, we're here to protect the civilians from the police and ICE, you guys agree? The Marines in general tends to have a lot of people from Hispanic backgrounds. This might not go how Trump wants it to. Pretty fucking upset. As a Marine veteran, this ain't it. Same, not what I served for, and this isn't the mission of the Corps. Locate, close with, and destroy the enemy by fire and maneuver, or repel the enemy's assault by fire and close combat. And there are no enemies in California. Only Americans, and those who want to become Americans. Seems like it was planned all along. Get the masses pissed off enough, turn the long arm of the law, military in this case, on them. I see it as a painful eventuality. Project 2025. It's still all there. This is what the GOP wants. It's still insane to me that they wrote this shit down, let it get out and people just brushed it off. I feel like we're probably going to watch our own military slaughter civilians on live TV and our country will change forever. Republicans are all cheering it on in our conservative. I saw one comment being upvoted that said, "Send in tanks. This is the small government they all claim to want. They genuinely don't give a rat's ass about being massive hypocrites and never will." Look at what happened at Kent State. Students from Kent State and other universities often received a hostile reaction upon returning home. Some were told that more students should have been killed to teach student protesters a lesson. Some students were disowned by their families. Means, Howard B. 67 shots, Kent State and the end of American innocence. Dark Apo Press, 2016. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/kent_state_shootings. Somehow people still believe the military will save us or that people will all have sympathy for the dead. There is 1/3 road of the voting population that is frothing at the mouth to see Californians gunned down in th streets. It's literally beyond me why they don't see this as an overreach. They're so blinded by their hate and stupid rhetoric and groupthink that they can't even see that there is no reason the government needs to go into LA and do shit. Even to protect their buildings. Fuck that. Cry me a river. It'll be cheaper to rebuild whatever buildings are destroyed than deal with the loss of life, loss of trust, and fallout from this. It's not free to deploy the Marines. They literally had a Tiananmen Memorial post last week and people were chiming in about how Democrats can't be allowed back in the White House because they want a Tiananmen of their own. No one seemed bothered that Trump has literally praised the massacre. As a former Marine, I am deeply upset that the military would be deployed in the US against citizens. Remember when everyone said Obama would do this? Now it's the so-called conservatives. SMH, how far we are falling and at the will of the GOP. Marines gonna make the grass grow. No, but in all seriousness, it's a very bad step. Active duty should not be deployed like this in US cities. We're only 5 months into this term and already talking about military being used against Americans. Damn, it feels a lot longer. Ridiculous overreach and overreaction. He's building and orchestrating an incident for numerous reasons. I served, did my time and can't even imagine still being in and deploying on US soil in this capacity. Would you refuse? Is that something that you could do? I don't know what the regulations would be. You would be insubordinate and receive an NJP at the least. I don't think you can refuse, but TBH, if I was in that situation I would be talking to AG officers about the issue. I believe it would be them, but I've been out for a minute. Regardless, I can't imagine it's a good idea. Either those soldiers are going to be highly uncomfortable going up against citizens, which you don't want. Or they aren't going to have a problem at all, which is deeply concerning given the tensions in our country. Every soldier has the freedom and obligation to refuse an unlawful order. As a former Marine, I just feel sad. Hopefully they don't forget themselves and try to gun down protesters, but this isn't what they're here for. My biggest hope is that as a professional force, they have a better understanding of RO than the current cosplayers do. My biggest hope is that as a professional force, they have a better understanding of RO than the current cosplayers do. Well, the Insurrection Act hasn't been deployed, so the Marines and National Guard really shouldn't be allowed to do anything but stand around anyways. Removed. Our troops should only be used to protect the country. Anything else get us into dictatorship territory. We're already there. Look behind you, we passed that mile marker back in November. Not to incite violence with this comment, just wanting to point out the fact that this is a prime example of why we need the Second Amendment. Edit, spelling. Reality is, all the 2A fanboys that cry, "I'm armed to fight off a tyrannical government," are at their keyboards in their parents' basement cheering this and taco guy on. The tyranny they wanted to fight off was simply a black president from almost 20 years ago. Lots of liberal 2A fanboys as well. But let's be honest, no one's going to volunteer to be shot as long as there is hope for another way. No offense, but fighting the Marines is going to be an uphill battle, Second Amendment or not. And that I just typed that turns my stomach. My husband was Army, my dad, brothers, and sister-in-law Navy, my nephew a Marine. Not one of them are for this crap. This is some bullshit is what it is. If you've ever been around a Marine, then you know if one Marine gets shot, those protesters are in deep trouble. Why weren't they sent to the Capitol when Trump supporters raided it? Why do you think Trump didn't send them then? Trump wants to be the user's first dictator, of course. Should be obvious to most educated people who paid attention in history class, especially the World War II section. This is a test, another one. This administration continues to push the limits of their power. Look around and see no one stops them. Repeat. My knowledge of history is a little spotty, but I swear this happened before. I think it was in some European country, and it didn't end well. Our checks and balances have failed us. This is a tyranny of the majority, exactly what the founders were trying to protect against. Next up, deportation of citizens that don't agree with the administration. It's not even the majority anymore. Trump's approval rating is the lowest of any president in history, so it's actually a tyranny of oligarchs who pretend to be the majority. Posse comitatus. The PCA has been narrowly interpreted by the courts to mean specifically law enforcement activities like arresting people or conducting searches. If the Marines are employed to do non-law enforcement things like providing security for federal buildings, then the PCA won't apply. The other thing is that the PCA has an exception in situations where other laws allow for military law enforcement. The most obvious example is the Insurrection Act. That's why Trump administration people like Vance keep calling this protest an insurrection, so Trump will have an excuse to invoke the Insurrection Act and use the Marines as federal police. Every time I hear insurrection out of those mouths in relation to the unrest in LA, my blood boils. To be precise, it's a little more complicated than that. The Insurrection Act is an explicit exception to the Posse Comitatus Act. It says that the military can be deployed domestically in times of insurrection or general public disorder. However, it says that the military can only be used at the request of a state government or if there is a finding that the state is unwilling or unable to maintain order on its own. The last time the U.S. military was deployed without the explicit request of a state government was the Central High Crisis of 1957, where the military was deployed to Arkansas to quell protests over integrating schools. George W. Bush contemplated deploying the National Guard to New Orleans during Katrina, but ultimately declined to do so because the governor of Louisiana had not requested it and he knew it would be controversial. Trump attempted to order the military to be deployed to stop Washington, D.C. protests during his first term, but the military told him that he could not because it had not been requested by the Washington, D.C. government. Per a press release, at least California has filed a lawsuit asking that the order to deploy the military absent the request of the California state government is unlawful. Complicit SCOTUS. Did you just call me a pussy communist? S.